today I'm going to be talking to you about lawful interception in the 5G era. So this is looking about some of the pitfalls or some of the challenges that you can expect to encounter as you try to deploy your networks, and some of the gotchas that you might run into. So let's go. So I'll start off with an overview of BAE Systems, just so you get some context of where we're coming from. So BAE Systems, we're a large defence company. We have about 80,000 employees, about 40,000 of which are based here in the United States. You'll notice we work on four main areas in the physical world, which is obviously land, sea, air platforms, but the main area that we focus in is on the right-hand side of the screen, which is the cyber and intelligence part of the business. This is important to differentiate from the standard defence mission you'd expect, because we work not only with nations and governments, but we also work with businesses. We provide cybersecurity services. We also provide a large amount of services into the financial services sector, for example, anti-money laundering and fraud detection systems. So I'd like to focus down now into the lawful interception part of the business. So our product specifically in this area is Data Bridge. So to remind ourselves why we need lawful interception, most carriers or communication service providers are mandated to provide a lawful interception capability of some kind. So this is the ability to support law enforcement agencies and intelligence agencies through wiretap functions. So this is the ability to provide real-time information on targeted users on these networks. So this may include not only the metadata, the who called whom question, but also the actual content of their data. And this also applies to broadband suppliers, not just traditional speech carriers. So you may see this as an actual internet carrier, internet data of a broadband provider as well. So BAE Systems, well, we've been doing this for about 30 years now. We even have systems dating back to lawful interception on fax from back in the earlier days. And we work all the way through now up to tier one operators, pretty much most corners of the globe. Some of our key clients include obviously some of the major tier one groups. And we partner with most of the major equipment providers. So this allows you to provide, if you have a multi-carrier environment or multi-equipment provider environment, this allows you to support all of your lawful interception functions onto a single network function. And again, we also we work with the standards. So lawful interception is a standards-driven industry, ATIS for broadband, ITSI, and then specifically around the 5G, 3GPP. And we're working quite heavily with 3GPP on the 5G and NFE standards. So how does this work in the 5G era? So to remind ourselves briefly on what we see on the 5G challenges. So obviously 5G gets a lot of attention because it's an enabler for the economy. We're also seeing things like the emergency services are likely to be hosted onto 5G systems. This makes them mission critical systems, so it gets a lot of attention. We see fibre-like speeds and reliability on mobile devices. So again, we're starting to see the trends which you're fully aware of the increased volumes of data that you can expect. So we're looking at broadband-type volumes, where traditionally mobile carriers have not had to experience this kind of size or scaling. Reduce connectivity costs. So we see CSPs leveraging cloud architectures to try and reduce these connectivity costs. But also how we see this working out in the market is, of course, is an increase in number of devices that are connected. So again, this goes back into the trends of we're seeing a lot more connection, a lot more devices, and a lot more data. So where are we on the standards trend? So within lawful interception, we generally work on standards, in particular the 3GPP, which applies to 5G. The standards in particular are 33106 to 33108. And we now see the new standards where we're migrating towards, which is 33126 to 33128. We've seen perhaps the standards in this area being, I think it's a trend we've seen across the board here. The standards are a little bit behind what's actually happening in the real world. So we've seen, for example, the NFV architectures only came out at the high level within release 15, which was sort of 2018 into 2019. This is at odds with some of our own experiences where we're working with US Tier 1 operators and we're going into production with NFV-based systems already. So again, this is where we see the trend of the large-scale providers moving ahead of the standards bodies. We also see, again, within these standards, we see a large number of architectural changes, obviously both within the 5G standards, but also within the LI standards as well. So changes on the LI standards to actually interoperate with the 5G core standards. Virtualization, as I discussed before, is a major trend we can see coming up, has reduced the cost of ownership of the LI function. We also see new network functions coming in. Again, we see this in the disaggregation of the RAN, controller and user plane separation. Increased use of encryption. So there's a heavy increase in encryption across the connections between network functions, but also just generally across the board. And again, as discussed earlier, higher throughputs and higher connectivity. So where we see the movement from 4G to 5G, we see this already in control and user plane separation under the 4G standards, so the CUPS standard. As an LI provider, we've already had to make architectural changes to the LI functions to support this. And we're having to work with the network equipment providers to support this within the LI domains. So we see, for example, with separation of control and user plane, a large amount of work that needs to be done in correlation between what's happening at the control plane and the user plane. So as I said, we're working with 2 vendors specifically in this area to support them in the correlation functions. This then feeds into the 5G deployment options. So within control and user plane separation, we see that as, say, option 3, which is the evolution of the 4G cores to support 5G. And this, I think, is the emerging trend we've seen in the recent years as the CSPs who need to refresh their 4G cores, they're getting themselves 5G ready and using the 4G core to support the initial 5G deployments. When we look through the remaining deployment options, say 2, 4, 5, and 7, again, we see 7 as the emerging trend, as we expect CSPs to deploy their 5G cores, reuse their 4G RAN, and then build out their 5G RAN underneath this. Again, with the introduction of 5G, we see some significant architectural changes within the cores. And this, I think, for the LI world is one of the biggest challenges. So I've got a somewhat simplified view here of the EPC of our point of intercept as being a single point. Now, this is well-established connections now with the standards have been out for quite some time now. The equipment vendors have generally managed to move towards quite an easy integration path for the Lawful Interception products. We generally see, for example, Huawei as a vendor, their point of interception is very close to the ETSI standard, so actually needs quite a light touch from the NLI provider. Where we see 5G, we can see significant changes within the 5G core architecture, and thus the points of interception require re-architecting. So again, we see new standards, new methods of communication, and then again, we're waiting to see how this impacts the vendor-specific interpretations of these standards at the working level and what this will mean. You'll also notice that there's significant increase, or there will be a significant increase in the amount of communication between the point of interceptions and the LI functions. So where we see things like the concealment of user on SUPI to SUKI, we can again see a lot more correlation activity need from the lawful interception functions. So again, increase in workload. So, and again, the final piece that we see as a major trend within 5G will be the use of virtualization. Again, we talked about trying to utilize virtualization to lower the cost of ownership. And we see the standard benefits of decoupling hardware and software lifecycle, which is a major part in the LI cost, is generally that constant need for reconfiguration and reintegrating systems. But we also see that this is probably underdeveloped at this stage within the Ally standards. I said we've seen within the Tier 1 space, where we're already going into production with a virtualized Ally system. And that's where the Tier 1s are developing their own methodologies and their own ways of working, which we're integrating with. But of course, we're then seeing the standards bodies playing catch up with this activity. And we were fortunate in the way that we've architected our particular Ally product that it's actually achieving alignment with the Ally standards. So we think we're in a good position to support this going forward. I've also presented a somewhat simplified view here of the virtualization. So generally, we would expect to see the Ally functions in quite secure environments due to the sensitivity of the information that they carry, in particular target data. So we would expect these virtualized systems to sit within perhaps their own compliance cloud, separated from the main virtualized architecture of the rest of the network. This, of course, presents cost challenges for the CSPs because this is quite a heavy overhead for quite a small function of the network. What we're hoping to see within the new standards is that we can move the Ally function into the main virtualized environment for the CSP. That would provide significant cost savings because we can then leverage the larger deployments of these clouds. And then hopefully, if we can get the security right within this Ally environment, we should be able to see Ally being deployed within public clouds instead of just private clouds. We're already experimenting with deploying into AWS, and that's perhaps getting a bit ahead of the curve here. But this may help support some of the smaller CSPs who can't necessarily afford the cost of integration into their own cloud environments. So again, why would you even look at the virtualization? Well, hopefully, if we can get this integration right, we should see things like network slicing working more effectively with the Ally world. Traditionally, if you made major changes to your RAN architecture, you then had to wait for the Ally function to catch up before you can launch these services. This is obviously quite a time delay for a CSP to have to then integrate additional functions on the end. Again, as a relatively small piece of the network, it's a function that's often overlooked, and when eventually the CSP comes around to realizing that they need to look at the Ally function, it will have an impact onto their deployment of these services. If we can use the virtualization to its full potential, we could see the full feedback through the MANO, the integration of the network slice feeds back up through the MANO and then stands up the relevant Ally service to support it. So this would then reduce the time to market and give the CSPs greater flexibility in their operations. So as a summary, what are we doing within the 5G world, particularly as BAE Systems? Well, so DataBridge, our product, is ONAP compliant, and again, we're working heavily towards the NFV standards as they're produced by 3GPP. Standards compliant, so our architecture is 3GPP compliant currently, and again, we're working towards the new standards. Data volumes, we're already supporting 5 gigabits per target within the virtual world, and we can go much higher for our broadband providers. But again, this is a challenge which we see as, again, as a compliance solution, you need to be conscious of the fact that you need to support whatever the maximum throughput of your systems will be. And so with 5G mobile systems, these can peak up to quite high data rates. So you should look for a system that can support everything that you expect your RAN to be able to deliver. The new functions, so it's talking about the control and user plane separation. We also see perhaps a disaggregation of the RAN providing new challenges as well within the Ally world. CUPS is probably the first step towards this, but again, we're looking at 3GPP to ratify the standards for edge processing for low latency services. And then the final piece is the unknowns. We at BAE Systems, we've been working on this for 30 years, and so the uncertainty really is business as usual for us. We've been working with the Tier 1 CSPs so that they can launch their services and do this with full compliance. So we generally work we do work effectively in these challenging environments, and we're really looking forward to whatever 5G is going to throw at us. So that's pretty much the summary for LI in the 5G era, and how BAE Systems intends to support the CSPs within this space.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
As far as I know, the relationship between control and data plane is one-to-one in CUPS. Is that right? Because you mentioned, right, go ahead.
Yeah, it is at the user level, but obviously where we see it's the connections to multiple user plane gateway connections, which is where we see the challenges. So obviously where you may see one control plane device, you may see multiple user plane devices. Within the Lawful Interception product we use, the trend currently is for active interception, which is to use mirroring on the network equipment to provide the data feed. So you need to provide an active, or you need to maintain an active state map of where the user is, or which device, which user plane device that the actual user is actually on. So you then can target that device to provide the correct mirror.
So if I do a slicing on, on not EPC, but on 5G, MF, so I have to, every and each slice has to be correlated to the control plane.
Yeah, so you'll need to know where to look for your user plane data,
okay.
Yeah.
As a definition of lawful intercept, is this something that requires a warrant by a government?
Yes, this is warranted.
As opposed to warrantless wiretapping?
Yeah, this is warranted
And
interception.
every country will have their own rules for it.
Yeah, that's correct.
And then it wasn't clear to me, I had to go to the men's room, so I may have missed it, but what standards organization are you working on for 5G lawful intercept? I didn't know there was such a thing.
It's 3GPP standards.
And where are they going to take that? Because 3GPP is, I'll show you if you want to sit down, they're not a standards organization. They make specifications that have to be taken to approved standards bodies. What's the ultimate target for that?
So we're seeing, you're correct, as a specifications organization. So yeah, we're seeing the specifications of 33126 to 33128. 33127 is the high-level architectural views, which is about as far as, well, it's really the most progress has been made in 33127.
But does it have to go to every country for lawful intercept?
You will then
Because the conditions might be different?
No, you will see country-specific overlays. So when a country adopts lawful interception, they will then apply their own overlay to the lawful interception standards.
Thank you very much.
I have two questions. The first one, how you see your solution aligns with the alignment with the NFV ITSI, SEC 013? Because we see in the architecture defined by ITSI, there is some function like virtual security function, network security function, and security orchestrator. But when trying to understand your diagram.
Yeah, so on the security functions, particularly around NFV, we're expecting to see that later this year coming out in the 33127. And where we've been doing this as our first deployments ahead of that standard, we've been working quite heavily with the specific CSP to provide a security wrapper that is suitable for the regulator.
So I expect all of these boxes will be coming from you, which are defined in ITSI SEC 11, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And the other thing, in your diagram, you were just showing NFV LI controller, right?
Yeah.
And it is shown as part of NFVO. I assume it will be some box which you will integrate with NFVO, right?
Yeah, they refer to the LI NFV controller. That's basically some control function within the MANO. So it's the ability for the MANO to know how to, what it needs to be doing, what it needs to instruct the LI system to do. As regards, we traditionally refer to like cookbooks or recipes effectively for a virtual function. If you need maybe an additional administration device to go along with the mediation devices because you're now reaching scaling limits, for example.
What is the protocol between them? Like which interface you use?
It's generally on a RESTful interface. So it could be something like JSON or equivalent. So we're integrated with ONAP, but again, because of the way that we operate, we can easily update to whatever API your particular cloud environment uses.
Could you say a little bit more about Data Bridge being ONAP compliant? what does that mean? How do you get certified for compliance, and what parts of ONAP is it compliant with?
So we are working with a tier 1 CSP in the US who has deployed and is actively or has gone into production with ONAP-based systems. And so we're basically hosted within that ONAP cloud. So when I would say ONAP compliant, it's obviously the ONAP specific interpretation or that CSP has deployed.
I see. So you're sort of present in an ONAP orchestration environment to do your LI.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much.
We're